I'm Sarah Wilson and you're listening to the Roots and All podcast. I'm here to help you get growing. Join me as I explore everything plant related both indoors and out and provide the information you need to create your perfect green environment. Hello and welcome to this episode of the podcast. To continue supporting the industry, this week I'd like to give a mention to How Green Nursery, who are still delivering to trade customers, and they're offering plants for collection to both trade and retail customers. They have a great selection of plants in the nursery and they're still able to source plants too, so it's worth giving them a try if you're after something specific. They're a family-run nursery and a wonderful family they are too. In fact, if you give them a follow on Instagram, you'll see the nursery in action and also the antics of the youngest member of the How Green family, Francesca. Their website is howgreennursery.co.uk if you'd like to check them out. Now on to the episode, and it's an interview I did with garden designer and author of the book Scent Magic, Isabel Bannerman. You'll deduce from some of the comments in the episode that it was recorded in autumn last year, and for one reason or another I've sat on it all this time, never quite sure when to release it. Of course there are scents in the garden all year round, but when you're heading towards winter and the scent of a sweet pea flower seems a lifetime away, somehow I couldn't quite get together the enthusiasm for this subject matter, and the episode really deserved it, especially as scents are such an important thing to me. I shared the episode with a Patreon group last week, and from the comments, it seems that many of them have a thing with smells too, and it made me realise what an underrated but powerful part smell plays in our lives. And if you read the book Scent Magic, you'll also realise that these are ethereal, ephemeral things, but they make up an integral part of our very being, and yet we don't have a consensus on our vocabulary to even begin to describe them. I begin the interview by asking Isabel why she uses the word smell in the book, much more than the term fragrance.
I mean, I like both words. I suppose the obvious distinction between them is that scent is definitely associated with nice smells, and smell is about anything, really. I mean, anything that smells. And I've got strange prejudices. I hate the word fragrance.
Yes, I noticed you didn't use that at all.
Yeah. And it's just something, I don't know why, it just really bugs me, so I didn't use it at all. And it is really difficult because, and then the Americans talk about odours all the time. And that sounds quite like your feet. But I like the word smell. I don't have a problem with the word smell. I think of it as good and bad. And so, because I like the whole business of smelling. And it's all associative. It's all to do with memory and emotion and stuff. So that's kind of what I was trying to explore more than the scent of scented plants, I suppose. Or rather, I found it impossible not to digress.
Yeah, because scent is everywhere in the garden and in the landscape. And whether we consciously acknowledge it or not, or make a conscious effort to design with it. I was actually reading an article where Julian was quoted as saying that the gardens you design are dreamlike, and I can attest to that because I went to Arundel Castle on the hottest day last year, and it was like some sort of dreamscape, and I photographed it and it came out, it was just incredible. It was really powerful. So how do you do you incorporate scent into your design?
Definitely, yeah, because we're both definitely really keen on it and always thinking about it. And you're right, it's not just about scented flowers. I mean, just in life, it's not about that. It's, like, especially now in autumn, it's all about this sort of fermenting, warm, earthy smell that autumn's so full of, isn't it? But I guess you can't design that. But we do design, yeah. I mean, we're always encouraging people to have pots of scented things like lilies and pelargoniums and night-scented stock, and just to add that other layer. I mean, Arundel is a particularly odd one because it is meant to be like a dream. It is meant to be super theatrical, like a court mask. So I'm really glad you felt like that.
Well, it's just the way that you incorporate the backdrop of the cathedral is just it's clever on so many levels.
Conscious thing to deal with it was.
I can imagine.
But also Martin's planting is amazing.
Yeah.
And we were really lucky there because they had a different head gardener then who was great. But we really wanted it to be full-on exotic. And then they got Martin, who's absolutely brilliant at all that stuff.
Mm. Yeah, it is fantastic.
And also you're quite lucky because it's quite mild along the south coast there.
Yes, we do get away with blue murder down here, that's for sure. So if you were incorporating scents into your design work, do you ever do a kind of conscious journey using scents?
Well, we might do something like... I finally got very excited living in Cornwall about scented rhododendrons. I never really liked rhododendrons very much. But our friend had this whole walk of rhododendron fragrantissimum that she'd taken from cuttings. And so things like, making a walk of something, or a lily of the valley path, or Eliagnus, lots of that somewhere. Yeah, we do sort of make stories of them.
I thought it was interesting as well, talking about the dreamscapes. It's kind of a bit of a lateral leap, but you mentioned that it's unusual to dream in scent, and then I thought about it and I thought, I don't ever remember dreaming scents. So can you just talk about that a little bit?
No, well, I don't either, and Julian, I've asked him about it. So I looked up the sort of science of it, and on the whole, people don't seem to. It's something like only 10% of us ever smelling anything in a dream, and most of those are women, which is interesting. I mean, the whole thing about men and women and scent is quite fascinating in that there's this guy in Dresden, I think it's Dresden, who's got a scent clinic, and he says that women come to him because if they lose their sense of smell, they miss the social aspects of it. They miss what it tells them about other people and their children and home. And he says that men come to the clinic because they miss the hedonic effects. They miss the straight pleasure of the smell of chocolate cake or whiskey, or you know what I mean? So it's interesting. It's such an incredible subject, the whole thing.
Yeah, you must have had quite the job actually setting the boundaries with the book, because it's vast. But I thought the other thing that was really interesting actually that you wrote about, and again it's a bit of a sidestep, but it was the whole issue of air pollution and how it's affecting the way that scent carries. So are there implications for that? I think you mentioned for wildlife.
Well, the thing is we don't really know, but we are sort of, slowly working out. I mean, there have always been some understanding of sort of phenomenal perception of scent in things like moths, which can smell up to 11 kilometers away, or they can smell one molecule of the female pheromone if they're looking for a female. But it's only recently that people have thought, well, how does whatever's in the air that we've been putting in the air, nitrous oxide and diesel particulates and all that kind of stuff, how does that affect it? And so the study from the University of Virginia has reckoned that in modern cities, the ability of, because all smell is actual molecules traveling in the air, it's sort of like looking at ink in water or something. It has to physically connect with you, or with the moth or the beetle or the bee. And if the air is very polluted, then it either combines and forms a different molecule, or it's just destroyed. So they reckon it's about 90% less perceivable by insects as well as us.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And presumably that's a real problem. It's a bit like we kind of twig that birds are confused by all the lights in cities. And I think insect life is just massively confused by all the smells we've created.
Yeah, no doubt. I think it's just another example of something that we absolutely do not understand, but that we're managing to wreck along the way, sadly.
Yeah.
So as I was reading, you do give a perspective on what smells you like and what smells you don't like, but you don't actually kind of name it. And I know it's a very difficult thing to do, but did you have a particularly favourite scent as you were along your travels?
Oh. Well, obviously it changes, but funnily enough, there's a picture in the book of a moss rose, and lots of people have looked at it and said, "Oh my God, that's amazing! I've never seen a rosebud that looks like that, covered in all that mossy sort of parsley-like stuff." And it's a real favourite of mine because you get the smell of the rose and the smell of this gummy, aromatic goo that's in the moss on the sepals on the outside. But that's just at the moment. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I must ask you actually about the mignonette because I grew some of that myself. I've grown it for a couple of years now. But the reason I tracked it down originally is because it's my grandmother's name. And, and she always says, "Oh, mignonette, I'm named after that." And I did actually get it going, and it does smell. To me, it smelled like Parma violets. It was really unusual. But did you crack it in the end?
Yeah, I mean they're not very sort of distinguished looking plants or anything.
No, they're very underwhelming.
But yeah, I did finally get to smell it, and exactly, I agree. It's like that sort of almost dolly mixtures. It's so sweet, isn't it?
Yeah, I gave it to her to smell, and she said to me, "I don't actually remember it smelling like that." So I thought, oh, typical.
Yeah, well, it's all a myth, isn't it? It's sort of, and you read old books, and I was completely transported by this. I think I wrote about it somewhere. Eleanor St. Clair Rhodes, who wrote in the 30s, she wrote a good book about scented plants. And she talks about how the West Country, when the apple blossom, when there was so many orchards, when you could smell it everywhere, the smell of apple blossom, which is, something it's almost impossible to smell when you just sniff a bit of apple blossom. And now there aren't enough orchards for one to smell it. So.
No, that's very true. Yeah, I work next to an orchard, and I can't say I've ever been overwhelmed by the smell. No, but then, as you say, there's probably so many other scents in the air at the moment going around that we're not getting those subtleties, maybe. But actually, that brings me on to a later question that I had, which was, does it matter where you place a plant in terms of getting a good smell from it?
Yeah, I think you can really help. In fact, I was reading about the other day, only recently, about honeysuckle, and the way to get it to smell, apparently, I haven't tried this, is because it likes to have cool feet because it's a woodland thing. So if you plant it on the cool side of a low wall, and then it grows over it, and then it needs to get sun in the afternoon, and then the volatiles warm up, and then it'll smell all evening. So, yeah, I mean, the obvious thing is to put them near doors and places where you're going to enjoy them, or they get kind of funneled. Because it is all literally like sort of gas floating around.
Yeah, that does make sense, actually. The best climbers that I've smelt are ones that sort of start somewhere buried in a flower bed, and then you just get the waft of the stuff because it's climbing over the top of a wall, for example. So maybe that is a really good recipe for it. I mean, some plants as well, you think that you could pick one plant and it would smell, then you could pick one of exactly the same variety and it doesn't smell. So again, it must be down to the individual plant too.
There's a very complicated thing about timing. Because emitting the smell is exhausting for the plant. So it seems like there's a very sophisticated mechanism and they stop smelling like night-scented plants stop smelling in the day, and the other way around. So they're not wasting it.
Oh, yeah.
Did I get lost with your question there?
No, not at all. No, I didn't think of that. Yeah, that does make perfect sense. And the other thing that fascinated me, and you did mention it in the book, was that personally, I'm not overly keen on wisteria, because although I do love the kind of top notes, I quite often get a base note of a fecal smell. And you mentioned that, and I think it serves a purpose, doesn't it?
Well, it's definitely something that comes up again and again and again, because you get it with lilac, hyacinths when they go over. It's partly the going over. I think it's a kind of decomposition moment, and that often happens when the thing has been pollinated,
Right.
and the plant wants to put off any further pollinators, stealing any more nectar. So you get this changing thing. And hyacinths are really horrible after a while, aren't they?
Yeah.
But also indole, which is this really uplifting molecule in lilac, and what was I going to say? What's the other one that's really strong in? I don't know about wisteria, because wisteria is a pea.
Oh, no, some narcissus are a bit that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, exactly. So indole is incredibly uplifting. It's best in white lilac, but it is also on the edge of this fecal thing. And some people are more sensitive to it than others, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's this whole subjective thing about what you like and what other people really don't like and stuff, isn't it?
Oh, it's so
So you
strange.
wouldn't plant wisteria, do you think?
Well, because of it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would completely put me off, but there are lots of things that I prefer the smell of. I think I'll go for really sweet things. So my absolute favourite, I think, if you put a gun to my head, would be Nemesia, which is ridiculously sweet. And I always say that's my favourite scent, and sweet peas as well.
Yeah.
But it's so subjective. I mean, I loved it when you said that you would pick something up and you'd say, oh, I think that's this, that and the other. And then you'd shove it onto Julian's nose and he would kind of look at you as if you'd lost the plot. And say, well, I'm not getting that at all, because it's so subjective. It's brilliant. But the other thing I was wondering is, as well, with your design work, or even when you've been travelling around gardens, have you noticed any scent combinations that actually work really well?
Well, yeah, it's interesting, that question. Someone asked me that in a talk the other day, and I thought two things. But one is that I think probably, nature's so amazing, it doesn't really do that. It's like I'm not fussy about what colours I put together. I think they all look amazing.
Yeah.
But if you're picking them and putting them in a vase, that's slightly different, because I once put together some Philadelphus and some, what's it called, the scented azalea, the rhododendron lutea. And I thought that was the most amazing combination of smell, and I'd never thought of it. And maybe you wouldn't necessarily, because the azaleas need a very acid garden to grow in, so you wouldn't necessarily be able to design a garden with that in it. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. You're limited by that. So there aren't any that you find particularly objectionable. You just don't think they clash.
Well, I quite like objectionable smells. I mean, I remember being really disappointed when I finally grew some eucomis in pots, and I think there are eucomis that don't smell foul, but all the ones I grew smelled really dead meaty and horrible. And I really like the look of them, but I haven't grown them again.
No.
But then there's a fuchsia tree here where we've just moved to, and I don't really like it. It's just by where we have the bins, but it's got this amazing. It always smells all piney and incredible. So I think I'm trying to persuade you to keep it.
Yes, and that is another, and that brings me on nicely to another question actually, because when you read the book, when people do read the book, I think that they will get to love Tremerton Castle more and more with every kind of turn of the page, because it is so central to the book. But I think you've actually moved from there now, have you?
Well, I know it's quite annoying because when I wrote it, it was sort of an advert to try and get people to come around the garden. And I thought, oh, well, the book will help. And then just a year ago, when I'd really finished the book, someone made us an offer. We had to get out of this repairing lease because it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
So it was a miracle that they came and wanted it. But it's a bit sad, and they're not gardeners, and they're not going to open it.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a bit tantalising.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a shame. And how do you feel about taking on a new garden? I mean, that must be a hard task.
Oh, I don't know. We find it really exciting. I think it's the thing, like not having a garden at the moment, but having all the possibilities and just thinking about them.
Yeah.
The best bit, isn't it?
It is really, yeah. Yeah. If you've got unlimited funds and time, that is. It's always...
Well, no, I don't know. I mean, we haven't got any funds.
Oh, no.
But,
well, that's the slog. That's the bit of it that
so it will be a slog. So the bit about just imagining it is there isn't any slogging. But it will be a slog. Yeah. And but funnily enough, I'm much less impatient, I think. I used to really want everything quickly.
That's my downfall. So how much scent are you going to factor into that garden? Is it going to be particularly led by that, having written the book?
The smell thing? Yeah, well, I think I've kind of suggested that one bit is my bit, and I'd really like to just, have like I thought about this while I was writing it, that sort of have like a paint box of all different smells. A smell box. I mean, just so that you could go to them and have them all. I don't know. It probably won't happen.
It would.
I mean, they're all there. They will all be there in the garden general mix. But I just thought it'd be quite nice to sort of systematise it somehow.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at vegetable gardening. But there's this bit that's a vegetable garden, but I think what I want to do is a sort of Monet type garden, but it's about smelly things.
I think that would be really clever to have it all.
Just very simple. I mean, I suppose, it's like Sarah Raven's Perch Hill. It's not particularly combining things, but just kind of like trial beds.
Yes. Yeah, that you could kind of almost label it by, not by smell, but by category of smell.
Groups of, but these are spicy ones and these are,
Oh, I can
probably
see why you're
won't
excited now. That's amazing. When you wrote the book, because since I've read the book, I've been going around sniffing everything. I can't help it. But did you notice anything that really surprised you as a scent, kind of either good or bad? I'm probably thinking more along the bad spectrum. Was there anything that you wouldn't necessarily have stuck your nose in if you weren't doing the book, but you did, and you kind of went, wow, this is powerful?
That's a good question. I mean, since I finished it, I keep thinking, oh God, I didn't put that in, and this is amazing. And like you mentioned the mesia, and I thought, oh shit, that should have been in.
Sorry.
But inevitably, it couldn't be everything.
No.
I don't know if there are some disgusting pelargoniums. I can say that.
Are there?
Yeah, God, that one that smells of baby sick.
Oh.
Is it called Filicofolia or something? And there are other ones like that.
We'll avoid that, but actually thinking about your UK Miss experience, I did the flowers for a wedding, and she also wanted potted plants. And stupidly, I just went and nabbed some eucomis from the market, and it smelt like it was like more chlorine than anything else.
Oh, right.
Like chlorine mixed with pee, and it was the most horrendous smell. We had to put them outside the venue in the end. That was a bit of a faux pas, but yeah, I don't know. I don't think people garden enough with their noses. I wish we did more of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, dahlias have such a strong smell, don't they?
Do you think? See, I don't get
But it's
that.
not a scent.
No.
It's just the smell of dahlias. It's more the smell of their stalks than anything.
Yeah, that's true. I always assume it's the flowers, but you're right. No, they do smell, but not
It's
in the
that
way
sort
you
of.
think.
It smells a bit like florist shops, which it's just sort of chopping things up.
Yeah.
But then it's so much sort of speaks about of autumn and September and things, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The end of summer.
And childhood, it's so linked with that,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, my sister got married in September, and I was a bridesmaid and hated every minute of it. and it was the 70s, and the theme was brown and cream, and and it was all dahlias and chrysanthemums and brown and cream, and the smell was just so overpowering.
Oh, chrysanthemums just reminds me of my great granddad.
Yeah,
That's a really evocative smell.
yeah. The Chinese drink chrysanthemum tea or something.
God only knows why. I mean, it wouldn't be high on my agenda. The other thing I thought was interesting, actually, and is in your book you mention in a couple of bits, I think, that you've rolled a cigarette and you've gone out into the garden, and I wondered whether you thought smoking affected your sense of smell.
I thought, I bet they'll take all that out if they ever do an American edition.
Oh.
Well, Julian I've given up now, but Julian is still smoking away and is convinced it doesn't make any difference. He's got the most brilliant sense of smell. Logically, it must impair it, I think. But it's an interesting smell, that tobacco-y smell, because it's very leafy, isn't it? It's very composty.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The other thing that kind of struck me since I've been sniffing everything is that quite often what I'm getting is myself, and it puts me in mind of that book Perfume, where I think it would be actually a blessing and a curse to not have a scent of your own, or to even food smells on your clothing. When you're trying to smell things, it's really confusing.
Yeah, and I think we like our own smell. I didn't put it all in the end, but I've got another whole book to write. There's this woman called Helen Keller, who was American, and she was blind and deaf, and she's the first woman, let alone blind and deaf woman, to get a degree in America in the 1890s, I think it was. And she's really amazing. And she did it so much by smell and touch. And she says that babies don't have any individual smell. They smell as babies.
Wow.
And that kind of, our individual smell kind of develops probably around puberty or late childhood, which is quite interesting.
Isn't it, though?
But I know what you mean. It gets in the way.
I'm really funny with people with smells. I'm not good at identifying smells, but people smells, I find them really overwhelming sometimes. I can even smell people the day after they've been somewhere, which is a bit weird, but yeah, it's a bit that is a bit of a curse, because
I think I've got this son who's very, very sensitive to smell. I think it is quite a curse. Julian hates aftershave and everything even more than real body smells. And I know what he means. I remember the first time we went round the Eden Project, we were in the trail of these people wearing loads of scent and body, what's it called? Aftershave. And it just ruined the whole thing. It's like being in an airport Well, it is a bit anyway, but...
That's a bit. Hell for me would be being trapped in the Eden Project for eternity with someone wearing Eden by Cacharel. But of course, scents are subjective, and to you, that may smell like a perfume that might be worn by Venus herself. And that is the beauty of scents. They're so deeply personal, and they factor in such unique ways in our memories. I'd like to say a very big thank you to Isabel for speaking to me about her book, which is a magnificent piece of writing. And to you, I say, as the natural world bursts into green and flower around us, stick your nose in the air and have a good sniff. Stay safe and well, and I'll catch you next Tuesday. You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website www.rootsandall.co.uk, where you'll also find my blog and a sign-up form for the newsletter, which gives you a weekly roundup of content, plus the inside scoop on things like upcoming guests. Or you can subscribe wherever you normally get your podcasts. Email me with comments and feedback at podcast@rootsandall.co.uk. Follow me on Twitter, Roots and All, Facebook, Roots and All UK, and Instagram, Roots and All Pod. But please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support my work, because if you like what I do, please help me to continue doing it. Even if you make a one-off donation of £1, trust me, it all helps, and I will be immensely grateful. So please go to Patreon and search for Roots and All.